If anybody wants, from back there, wants to go up, there's two here in front. All right, thanks, Matt. I think we're going to give it a start. I think our live stream is rolling. Yes? Okay. I want to welcome everyone here tonight to Deep Talks for April 2024. My name is Mike Ray. I'm the Media Relations Manager here at Sanford Underground Research Facility. It's awesome to see such a great crowd on a beautiful night. Thank you all for coming out. Tonight we're going to celebrate some of the operations here at SURF. Operations is really the foundation that we all stand on. So it's great to be able to come together and hear some great updates on our operations. And we're going to do that just shortly. I'm going to try and do some proper introductions. But first, we need to thank the awesome folks who sponsor this event, who provide the great free beverages and food that we all get to enjoy, and who provide help to make this all happen every year. We want to give our thanks to our sponsors, and to do that is Michelle Kane, the director of the SURF Foundation.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so who is new? Oh, that's wonderful. We're going to clap for Mike. So who is new? Who is your first time at Deep Talks tonight? We are so glad you're here, and we want you to learn something new, be inspired, and make some connections, because that's what Deep Talks is all about. So my name is Michelle Kane, as Mike mentioned, and I'm with the SURF Foundation. And we raise funds for public outreach, like Deep Talks here tonight. Our internships, we have cultural programming, educator professional development, and July 13th, Neutrino Day. I want you to put that in your calendar, because that's when LEAD becomes science. Well, I can't say 24/7, but just during the day, it's going to be science. So tonight we are acknowledging our sponsors, which includes Chris Mitchell from Edward Jones and Spearfish, Chuck and Jolene Linkton Wallner out in New Jersey, and they watch us every night on our live stream. And we always want to show appreciation for our friends at Crow Peak Brewing, who have been quenching our thirst here at Deep Talks since 2015. So let's give them a round of applause, because they always watch online too. We invite you to become a friend of SURF, and you can do that by being one of our donors or one of our sponsors. So we have a donor box on your way out, and you can also donate online. And you have to stay till the end, because we're going to do our raffle for this beautiful blanket, because it's supposed to snow this weekend. And we have a wildflower book, which is in celebration for our ethnobotanical garden, which we have a fun planting party. So keep an eye out for June 12th and help us to plant over 400 native plants here at SURF. So we're really glad you're here, and we're going to turn it back to Mike.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And I'm going to introduce Mike Headley. That's great. Thanks to our foundation, too. That's all good stuff. Yeah. I want to introduce Mike Headley, the South Dakota Science and Technology Authority Executive Director and the Lab Director here at SURF. Mike's going to open up the talk tonight, and that's going to be followed up with some talks from Wendy Straub, the Director of Hoists and Shafts at SURF. And then Jeff Barthel is going to be coming up as well, a rigging specialist at SURF, and Dale Curran, the SURF System Integrator. So it's going to be a great talk, and without further ado, I'll pass it over to Mike.
All right. Thanks, Mike. It's go ahead and get started. Obviously, we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and some pretty interesting topics that I think really are playing a huge role in a lot of the major work that's happening up at SURF right now. So hopefully you find it interesting. All right. So each one of us is just going to give you a little bit of background on what we've done for our career. I've been doing this kind of work now for 30 years, and every time I say that, I feel super old. But basically managing big projects like this one. And so I've been doing that for a while. And I've been here at SURF for 15 years, and I've been the director for 10. And it's been a pleasure. It's amazing how quickly the time has flown. And I was talking with Chris Berger, our HR manager, the other day, and our average tenure of folks working at SURF is almost 8 years, which is really pretty impressive for this day and age when people change jobs fairly often. All right, so a quick overview on the SDSTA. Our mission is really about two things: doing the world's best underground science and inspiring learning with the things that we're doing at the lab. And that includes our K-12 STEM education program and programs like this, where we get a chance to interact with the public about the work that we're doing. So we currently have, the SDSTA, South Dakota Science and Tech Authority, have about 186 staff. And we're going to talk a bit about the Long Baseline Neutrino Facility that's being constructed right now to support DUNE, the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment. Our Fermilab colleagues plus their contractors add about close to another 200 people. And that, along with researchers who are working on a daily basis up here, we have about 400 people who are working up at SURF. Day after day. So our responsibility as the STSDA, we're the owner-operator, and making sure that we can support our science user base. So we're now up to 29 different user groups that are different collaborations that we're working with, and over 2,000 collaborators, actually about 2,300 collaborators, which is pretty amazing. So we support, the SDSTA, we support the construction of LBNF DUNE. That's primarily operating the raw shaft and getting materials and people in and out of the underground so that the construction can happen. I mentioned our K-12 and public STEM E&O program. And our day-to-day operations is funded through what's called a cooperative agreement. It's basically like a research grant with the U.S. Department of Energy. And it's amazing to say this, but we are now in the 5th year of our first 5-year agreement, and we're working with DOE to renew that for another 5 years. And so the first 5 have gone great, and they said, hey, we want to do it again, and we said, we're happy to do that. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the science program tonight, but this gives you kind of an overview. So SURF is rather unique in the world. If you look at all the various underground labs that are located around the world, most of them focus primarily on physics, and that's it. And really, SURF has been a multidisciplinary lab doing all sorts of different work really from the start. And so obviously physics plays a huge role in what we're doing. And the physics experiments that we work with today primarily focus on trying to figure out what dark matter is all about, this 80% of the matter in the universe that we really don't know anything about. We're trying to figure it out. And neutrinos, we've had an experiment called the Myrana demonstrator here at SURF for a number of years. They're kind of at the end of their time here. So we've had a good run with them, and we are moving towards getting the LBNF DUNE experiment installed over the next few years, and towards the end of the decade actually going operational. And so that's really been our main effort. Of late, we've done a lot of work with biology, and this is one area that we've worked with a lot of the universities here in the state, is doing biology related work. And so they are really excited to go look at bugs that live in rock way deep underground and in areas that are super hot. And so they find some pretty novel organisms to look at and study. And then geology, we've done geo work for quite a while, and what you're seeing here, this is down on the 4,100 foot level where we've got a geo lab set up that was being used to study enhanced techniques for geothermal energy production, and we're doing some similar work to that now, but it's been really productive and a great group to work with. So LBNF DUNE. Are we good? Okay. Oh, okay, got it. So LBNF DUNE, I'm not going to talk about this chart in detail, but really basically the experiment is directing a beam of human-made neutrinos from Fermilab, located just outside Chicago, to big liquid argon-based detectors that we're going to have a mile underground. That's what we're trying to do. And so I talked about over 2,000 collaborators. A lot of them are associated with this experiment. And so 218 institutions and approaching 40 countries that are involved. So if you came to Deep Talks this last month, our Fermilab colleagues did a really great job talking about the excavation. And so the excavation of about 800,000 tons of rock is basically done. And so, which is just a huge achievement, and hats off to Fermi and Tyson Mining, and it's been our pleasure to be a part of that. But this is a picture from kind of the floor level of the North Detector Cavern. So this cavern is 475 feet long, about 92 feet tall, and 65 feet wide. And they're phenomenal. These are just some of the biggest excavations in the world, and it's just amazing to have them here. So in addition to doing the caverns and all the tunnels that connect them, they have been kind of raising the roof, so to speak, where the raw shaft meets the 4850 level deep underground. And the reason for that is to build the cryostat and the box that keeps the dune detector super cold. Some of the beams coming down are over 40 feet in length, and so we have to hang those underneath the cage, bring them down, and then pull them out and move them into the cavern. And prior to this, the ceiling was about here. It was only about 8 to 10 feet in height, and now it's 60 feet up the shaft. And so this is one of the last major excavation activities that Tyson did, and was incredibly successful. So we're now starting to see some of the components showing up for taking the planning that's gone through over the last few years to figure out how we're going to get all this stuff underground and do it efficiently. We're now getting actual sample materials that we're working with. I mentioned these long beams. This is one of them. It's basically the beam that is the wall of the cryostat that holds the detector. And then the corner beam, which is kind of down along the side where you make the transition from vertical to horizontal, that's what this is here. And so these are some of the most challenging things that we need to get underground to build the dune experiment. And so it's great that we're getting some materials to actually practice with and figure out if our plans are going to be successful. So in addition to all the science that's active today and what we're building for the future, our K-12 STEM education program has continued to move forward and make just amazing progress. And so the scope of what we do for K-12 E&O really hasn't changed, but we continue to do presentations where we go out into the schools. We have kids come here for field trips. We have a number of curriculum units that are based on the latest generation science standards that kids need to meet to be able to graduate. And so we share these kits with teachers around the state and with tribal schools, and it gives them 5 to 15 hours of hands-on instruction that they don't have to create that and they don't have to buy it. And have been incredibly popular with teachers who, especially teachers in small districts that are teaching a lot of different subjects and don't have the time really to develop this kind of stuff. So this has been really cool. And we do a lot of different types of internships, and then our program in working with teachers and helping them advance their skills has really moved forward as well, and providing high quality professional development for them. So a few numbers. We don't have prior COVID on here, but if we did, prior COVID would be about 12,000 students a year in the state that we've worked with. We had to, like everyone, kind of pivot during COVID and figure out how are we going to do more things online. And then coming out of COVID, our numbers have just been tremendous. So right after we came out of COVID, we worked with almost 20,000 students, almost 18,000 last year, and we're on track to work with 16,000 this year. And so Nicole Reiner in the back, if you would kind of wave, she is the director of that. I know a number of her folks are here in the crowd, but they just are doing a tremendous job taking what we're doing here and impacting the lives of K-12 students here in the state. So pretty cool. And teacher professional development, we're now working with on an annual basis about 400 teachers in the state and helping them advance their skills so that our kids are getting the best science education that they can. So our economic impact, this has really not changed since the last year. We're still projecting in this decade to have about a $2 billion economic impact in total. And if you add these two numbers, that gets you close to $2 billion. And if you count all the jobs in the state that are positively impacted by what we're doing, that's about 1,200 per year. So kind of going back up to the top, this is a number that both Casey Peterson and I, a couple of years ago, we were trying to get money from the legislature to build out more space. I think we parroted this line more times than we care to admit. But the investment from the state has been substantial at $75 million. But what that has done, every dollar the state has put in, it has returned $15 from outside sources. So the federal and private investment is now over $1.1 billion in activities here. And so we already talked about the 400 folks, and the LBNF Dune experiment will take about 10 years to build, and then it needs to operate for at least 20 in the future. So that really does bode well for us continuing to get a steady stream of funding from the Department of Energy to keep SURF moving forward. So that's great news. So we launched a new institute back in December. And so this has really been something we've been working on for about the last 5 years to plan and roll out and start to operate an institute that is really unique in the world, that's focusing on underground science and being a world leader in doing this. And I won't go through a lot of the details, but basically what we're trying to do is, we host a lot of experimentalists who are coming and turning wrenches and operating experiments a mile underground, but we don't necessarily get a lot of theorists who are trying to figure out where are these fields going next, and people like that who really kind of round out the intellectual community of the science that we're doing. And so by having this institute, we hope to provide opportunities where a broader group of scientists will be able to come here and do work and really develop synergies with all the experimental work that's happening here. So that's up and going. We actually had an institute activity last night and today. We had 27 faculty from 7 different universities here in the state that were here to have conversations about how can we work better together and develop additional opportunities for collaboration. And it was tremendous. So there's a lot of words here, and basically what this is trying to say is the particle physics community in December finished a 10-year strategic plan looking forward of what they want to do over the next 10 years. And so there were a lot of recommendations that came out of that. This is the report. It was developed by a committee called P5. They're really just the committee that takes all the science input and figures out what they're going to recommend to DOE and what could be afforded. And so some of the things that they said in this report, SURF was mentioned about 24 times in a 100-page report, so we were featured pretty prominently. But with SURF, we've created a premier underground laboratory. We were obviously pretty happy to hear that. And expanding LBNF Dune. The first 2 detectors are kind of in the queue to be built and go operational. There's 2 more that need to be funded, and so there was good support for that. The next generation, or Generation 3 dark matter, that got a lot of great support as well, including hosting one of those here in the US, and that would have to be here. And then funding having the Department of Energy fund the infrastructure that goes into the caverns that we're trying to build on private money. So expanding SURF to be able to host additional science into the future was really the bottom line. All right, with that, that's kind of the fire hose of SURF update. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wendy Straub, our Director of Hoists and Shafts, and she's going to talk about what we're up to maintaining and operating the shafts.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Wendy Straub. I'm the Director of Hoists and Shafts here at the Stanford Lab. It's great to see you all. I'm sure you wonder what we're up to. Just a little bit about me. I have a little over 25 years of mining engineering and operations experience. I've been employed here at SDSCA for 7 years on and off. I was an engineer from 2009 to 13, and then left for an opportunity to manage an underground trona mine in Wyoming. So happy to be back. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about both the Ross and the Yates. I'll give you an overview of the history, what are the day-to-day activities that happen at the Ross and the Yates, and what are the projects that we're currently working on. We're going to start with the Ross shaft. I know it sounds cliche, but I feel like the Ross and the Yates are really the heartbeat of our operation. So this all started back in the 30s with the Ross shaft. It was constructed of structural steel. It is outfitted with 2 Norberg hoists with a bi-cylindrical conical drums on both the cage and the skip hoist. These were both refurbished. The shaft and both of the hoists have been recently refurbished in support of the LBNF dune excavation. This is our 85% of what we do day to day is to support LBNF dune. This is the only option that we have currently to hoist rock out of the underground, as well as it is housing all of our dewatering facilities, including our deep well pump at the 5,000 level that leapfrogs up and then eventually out of the mine and into the wastewater treatment plant. It also serves as one of 2 main ventilation intakes. Currently, all access is through the Ross shaft, all activities, both science, operations, and excavation. And we'll talk a little bit about the Yates. The Yates is currently out of service due to heavy maintenance activities. So I tell people, you know, I got a new pair of shoes, and you might be able to, in your mind, visualize what that means. When I say that we've got a new shaft, people might not necessarily know what that means. So I wanted to provide this short clip. This was during the Ross rehabilitation process. I find it ironic that the Ross and the Yates were constructed back in the 30s with no ground support, no rock bolts. So when we're going back into these facilities, you can see the rock bolts and the mesh. I've got some examples over here. When I say bolts, people maybe don't understand the magnitude of what a rock bolt really looks like. The structural steel was brought in piece by piece, welded, fabricated in the shaft. And this took over a course of about 7 years to complete. So what is it that we do at the Ross shaft? So everything that we do begins with safety, whether it's day-to-day operations or projects. You can see here we've got Ross shaft Superintendent Mike Johnson providing a safety topic, and you can see the crew is intently paying attention to Mike here. So really what we've been doing in the last couple of years is the safe transport of people and supplies in support of the excavation. Roughly 31,825 loads of materials have been transported in the shaft in this time frame. That includes over 10,000 bags of concrete and shotcrete and over 100,000 rock bolts. 322 slung loads. Our goal is to really try to get everything on the cage. So our vendors and contractors, we work with them to break the equipment apart so that it'll fit on the cage, like you see this mucker bucket. But sometimes, and you'll hear from Jeff, we need to sling things underneath the cage. And we've completed, this has actually gone up since I created this slide, safely, 322 slung loads. 16,803 personnel trips, 126,000 skips, equating to roughly 800,000 tons excavated from the 4850. This is an example of how we transport concrete and shotcrete. Not a lot different than what it was in home state days. In fact, some of the rolling stock that you see here has been refurbished and utilized today. Shaft inspections are a big part of what we do. COVID also reached us, and we had very strict protocols to follow in the shaft. We do testing on our equipment. This is an NDT test on the hoist ropes. We do this biannually to make sure that our hoist ropes are satisfactory for operation. And then we're starting to get some things like this is an accelerometer test. Some of the folks from LBNF Dune want to make sure that the sensitive scientific equipment will be okay being transported on the cage. And so they outfit the cage with their instrumentation and look at the data, and we try to tweak things as necessary. So projects, it's not just day-to-day operations, we also do special projects. So on the left, you can see this is the legacy homestake Ross counterweight. and we recently replaced it with a new one. This is about a 15,000-pound piece of equipment that had to be slung into the shaft and ultimately attached and put into service. One of the things that we do is we do hoist rope cuts. You can imagine that these are mile-long ropes. They're about 1 7/8 inches in diameter, and they get worn out when they're going over the shiv wheel and different parts where they show wear. And so what we need to do is we need to cut the rope. One of the things you see these gentlemen doing is taking twist out of the rope. As the rope is going up and over the shiv wheels over a mile-long shaft, there becomes a lot of twist in the rope. So the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to take that twist out of the rope. There's a lot of stored energy there. Second thing you see these gentlemen doing is we measure several times and we cut once. So we prefer to do rope cuts on a scheduled basis. So that's kind of in a nutshell for the Ross. The Yates is a very different purpose for us today. It was also constructed in the 30s, but during wartime. So steel was not available, and the shaft was constructed of timber. The shaft was initially driven to the 41 and then extended back in the 50s to the 4850 level. The shaft is concrete for the first 300 feet, and then it is 10 by 10 timber to the 41, where it transitions to 12-inch by 12-inch timber. The shaft is outfitted with similar systems to what you see at the Ross with the Norberg hoisting systems. It's a little bit different, and then we have 2 conveyances and a balanced system. The Ross has a cage and a counterweight. The Yates has 2 cages. That helps us quite a bit when we're doing shaft work. Both the hoists and the shafts are original. Safety catches or rope dogs were installed in 2010. These are required in modern personnel conveyances for safely transported personnel. It also serves as a secondary egress for the underground. We've used it a couple of times. It works fine. And it is also one of 2 main ventilation intakes. So what do we do at the Yates? On a day-to-day basis, we do weekly shaft inspections. We do this on Monday night. And then we're responsible for all of our conveyance inspections, maintenance on any of the conveyances. And then one of the things that I think is pretty cool is employees are finishing out the timbers that we're replacing in the shaft. So we have this old homestake blueprint, and the employees are coming in on overtime and they're finishing out the timbers like you see here to go in the shaft. We're doing rock bolting. This is one of the things that I mentioned earlier that was kind of sporadic. So we're doing a full rock bolting pattern through the entirety of the shaft. And then we can't forget our science customers. So on Wednesdays, we provide liquid nitrogen deliveries to the 4850 foot level. So I mentioned heavy maintenance. We call it top-down maintenance. It is exactly what the title is. We start at the top and we work our way down to alleviate hazards overhead. Not all of the compartments have conveyances. You have the 2 skip compartments, the 2 cage compartments, but there's also utility, chippy, and ladder compartment that don't have conveyances. So you can see in this photo right here, we build platforms to get out there. In order to do the rock bolting and timber replacement, we have to build this platform. The next thing we do is we remove lacing. This is an example of lacing. It's essentially we're boarding the outer perimeter of the shaft to prevent anything that might be falling from coming into the shaft. So we remove the old lacing, and then we clear the timber and debris. Picture number 3 is a good example of a lot of timber that has kind of fallen and debris that needs to be cleaned out before we do anything. The next thing that we do is we scale the rock wall. Any loose material that might be built up or cracks in the rock, we scale that off. And then we cut the legacy pipe. You can see here there are various quantities of legacy pipe that is remaining in the shaft. Some is in good shape, some is not. So these are hazards that we need to prevent. So we're cutting all of this out. And then we replace the structural timber and we utilize these J hooks. So it starts at the top of the concrete and all of the structural timber is J hooked like you see in this photo. And then every 7 sets, we do an anchor, what we call a turnbuckle. So a turnbuckle is jacklegged with a pin into the rock and then resin into the rock, and then it's supported right here with the timber. So this provides a lot of support for the structural timber starting at the top all the way down. And then we screen and pattern and with a full rock bolt pattern like you see here. And then we replace the exterior lacing panels like you see here. In the old days, all the compartments were kind of boarded off. We're just replacing the outer. I always say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So this is the 1,700 foot level. You can see on the left here, this would have been the skip compartment and the doors. This was me standing on the cage looking out into the shaft. You can see how the structural timber is maybe not in the best shape right here. So proud to say that the crews did a fantastic job. This is what it looks like today. And hot off the press, the 1,700 level is going to be open for business next week. So all of the structural timbers have been replaced. You can't see the rock bolts here, but there's rock bolts installed. All of this decking was replaced. We call this the dance floor. Used to be kind of spongy, and it's pretty solid now. So pretty proud of the work that the crews have done to make this happen. And like I said, this is going to be open next week. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Jeff Barthel. All right, everybody sit down. So, my name is Jeff Barthel. I'm the rigging and hoisting specialist at Sanford. I'm a nearly lifelong lead resident. I graduated high school here and went away for college and came back and took over the family business for quite a while. Been working here at SURF for 5 years this month. And about 3 years ago, I became the hoisting specialist here. Those of you like me who didn't know what a hoisting specialist was, basically I work on anything that has to be lifted with a crane or a hoist or the cage in the shafts. That can be anything from like this 15-ton staircase that we had to install at the new rock maintenance building to any of the loads that have to go underground. There's a lot of calculations and work that goes into designing these lifts because we have to make sure that we're very safe and that everything that we are doing isn't going to put anybody or any equipment at risk. Almost everything that we put underground is worth a lot of money, and for sure the shafts are worth a lot. So we, on most lifts, we'll do a test lift somewhere above ground with one of the big bridge cranes that we have in a crusher room or one of the other cranes, and make sure that the plan that we came up with looks like it's going to work okay. We'll lift up a piece of equipment, make sure that it's hanging straight, and that the rigging that we planned for controls the item the way that we want it to. When we put something underground under the cage, we use, this is the bottom of the cage, and it's got pick points kind of all across it, and we use those points to attach whatever it is that we're going to put underground. We use usually a polyester sling and shackles. These are mini versions of those things, and we'll attach them to the cage and pass them around so you can look. And those will attach the load to the cage. And in the case of the polyester sling, those are very helpful because they have a little bit of give. So it'll insulate the load from some of the vibrations and the little bumps that happen when you're going underground. When we go to sling something under the cage, we'll lift the cage up above the load and then introduce it into the shaft. Technicians have to actually drop a work deck and then go over an open shaft to attach it to the cage. It's very dangerous. They do a lot of training, a lot of safety training, and we take it very serious. That's why all the planning has to take place, because we have to make sure that we're very safe. As the cage goes up higher, the load will start to stand up underneath it, and we'll lift it high enough so that we can get it completely underneath the cage. And then we'll bring it down into the shaft, and technicians will get back on the cage and open some inspection covers so they can watch the load. There are lights underneath the cage. You can watch it the entire way down. Then when we get to whatever level underground, the technicians get out of the cage and we'll bring the cage back up so that we can see the load underground, and we'll grab onto a little tag line down here to help pull it back out of the shaft. And then as we're pulling it out, the cage comes down, the load comes out. The cage operators that we have are very, very good at their job. They can lower that cage at inches at a time, and they can be very, very precise with the movements and knowing where the cage is at all times. And we get the load back onto the ground at the level that we're going to, and pull it out so that it can be disconnected from the cage. Those things I just showed you are pieces of mining equipment that are going underground. What we're planning for now, and have been planning for some time, are the science loads that we're going to be doing primarily with Dune. This is a thing called a APA frame. It's going to have a thing called an anode plane array. I don't know what I did here. There we go. Jeez. Okay. I don't know exactly what it is, except it's a gigantic screen door made out of 19 kilometers worth of screen, the size of a human hair. That box is worth $1 million. There are 79 of them that have to go down for a cryostat. It weighs 12,000 pounds. It's nearly the size of the shaft. And if something happened to that, there are no replacements. If something gets damaged, it's months of delay and many millions of dollars. So it's years of planning to get that thing underground. This is a wooden mock-up of the L-shaped beam that Mike was showing earlier that we built so that we can practice in the space that we have to work with. We can practice moving that beam around and see how it's going to fit in the space that we have. This job takes a lot of planning, a lot of math. I had to dust off trigonometry skills that were dormant for a long time. Luckily, Pythagoras theory still stands. But yeah. But we got a lot of technicians that luckily I don't have to do all this. I just have to help plan for it. We've got some shaft personnel that work for Wendy and Kip Johnson and Mike Johnson that are very good at what they do. Anything that we do that involves the shaft, if one of these loads, got out of whack and hit something or got damaged, we're putting the lives at risk of anybody that's on the cage, anybody that's underground, because you could do something that would keep the cage from being operational. You could strand people underground. You could damage, obviously, the cage or the shaft that could cause the entire lab to be shut down for months at a time. So why did you give me this job? All right, I remember now. So, but it's been a great job. It's a great place to work. I have the best job at the lab because I get to work with virtually everybody, scientists, technicians, administrative people sometimes. It's a great job. But that's all I got. Dale, you're next.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, but I've sat out there a few times, but never been on this end, so hopefully it goes okay for me as well. Did not volunteer for this job, this one, but here I am. Dale Curran is who I am. I too have started about the same time as Jeff, maybe a year before that. A little bit about myself, born and raised here in South Dakota. Went to Mitchell Technical College back in 2000. There was only 2 in my class. So that kind of represents how strong that industry wasn't at the time, I guess. It certainly blossoms. I think it's one of their highest courses now for graduation class. Lived in the Black Hills, raised a family here since 2000, and I've worked at various industries in the Black Hills over the last 20 years, culminating in my position now here at SURF. Get my foot in the door. Lawrence Berkeley had a partnership with Sanford Underground to put the LZ detector on the 4850. They needed somebody to help wire in some 2,000 instruments, calibrate those, and validate. Each one was going to do what it is. Here you can see this is what's called a PLC. It kind of comes into play in my job. That's what you program in order for it to do what it's supposed to do. You guys don't even know what I'm talking about yet. We'll get there. But yeah, as you can see here, it's just there's actually 5 of these underground with the LZ project, and you can see all the wires that come in right there. Yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to get to know the science department, how they work. I've met a lot of wonderful people through that process. And it's kind of given me this good opportunity to float back and forth between SURF and science. So what is SCADA? So that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. So I, along with others in my team and the operations team, we kind of work on the processes that allow the mine to function without us constantly being there to push the button to make it happen. So what is supervisory control and data acquisition? Is a process by which field data is acquired, known as an input, and a logical decision based off that input can manipulate an output. So if the gentleman's hand isn't breaking the plane of the saw and he hits the start button, voila, the fan will start. There's a controller that's allowing that to happen. In addition to that, oftentimes you'll have some kind of visual representation that the operator can control. It usually looks like a screen, like a computer screen. Can also just be a button. But from there, you'll often see set points, monitor alarms, look at trending, look at historical data, events, things of that nature. So quick show of hands, how many in this room are capable of adjusting the thermostat of their home? Monitoring their front door, or watching who's at their house, or starting their vehicle from potentially their phone. It's becoming more and more uncommon to be able to do some of those things. So if you can in fact do that stuff and you raise your hand, then you too are kind of an operator of your own little SCADA system. It tells you the status of what your house temperature is, your car's running. You issue a command and it tells you what it did. And so, yeah, I kind of have a real quick. So we are live remoted into our SCADA system for our water treatment plant. It's actually, so the operators operate this during the daytime. So I don't know if those of you who are local are probably familiar with, oh no, oh there it is. The Grizzly Gulch Reservoir up on the hillside, the old Homestake Reservoir where their tailing piles were. So we still treat some of that water that comes down through our water treatment plant. I just kind of wanted to, I guess, represent one small thing, so here I'm going to change the amount of water literally coming from the reservoir up there. So that is, 5 miles away as the bird flies. I just changed it from 350 gallons per minute to 250. As you can see, this pump right now is starting to ramp down its speed from, I think it was at 68%. It'll eventually drop down. And the flow, as you can see right here with a flow meter, is starting to drop down. It'll eventually hit that 250 mark and everything will be happy. And so that'll be the new value that we're seeing at the water treatment plant. Yay, it worked. Okay. So a quick history lesson. So in the 1970s, the automotive industry kind of started using some of these processes. It really made the U.S. car industry what it was for many decades. To some degree, you can attribute a little bit of the domination that this country had in that marketplace to these control systems. Here you can kind of see a current modern day, almost anything, any kind of product that's being built out there can look similar to this on a factory floor. But other industries, they followed suit. Mining, like Sam or Homestake, public utilities, HVAC, they all followed suit and started utilizing this technology. So Homestake started utilizing it in the 1980s to monitor things such as dewatering, the wastewater treatment plant, underground ventilation, environmental monitoring of COs and things like that underneath the ground. And SURF still utilizes a lot of that equipment to this day. When Homestake kind of closed up the doors in the 1990s, they left all that stuff there. It still works, so we're still using it. So here's one of our operator or one of the team members of our maintenance team. So as the maintenance team goes, we not only utilize the system and maintain it and troubleshoot it, and also integrate new things into it. But when a pump goes down, we rely on that to give us an alarm. We'll go back and look at the history. Has it been pumping correctly? Has the temperatures risen on a bearing? We'll use it for all that kind of stuff. So we're not only just maintainers of it, we're also utilizers of it. Kind of the partnership between science and the operations group and the SCADA systems that we have. Obviously our dewatering system, so we bring water up from what we call the deep well, which is currently down at the 5,900 level. We pump that up to the 5,000, the 3,600, the 24, the 12, and eventually gets to the surface. That's all fully automated. So our operators at the wastewater treatment plant, they'll set when they want that to happen, at what levels, and it, aside from them entering their data, it does what it's supposed to do on its own. So without that system, eventually the mine becomes a giant well. Obviously ventilation, we have our Oro Hondo site and shaft, which is constantly pulling air out from underneath the ground. Without that process, eventually the mine would become, eventually it will naturally breathe on its own, but especially to get rid of the excavation mining dust and things of that nature and keep fresh air intake. It gets really hot underground without ventilation, so we maintain that at all times. The environmental monitoring is continuous underground. We make sure there's no bad air underground at all times. Also, in the event that there's a fire, something of that nature, some kind of oxygen deficiency event, we can hopefully start to chase that down and figure out where that's coming from, get people evacuated in the right direction. And then HVAC underground is also a big thing. Like the LZ experiment relies really heavily on some of the chillers and things like that underground. One of the interesting things that I learned underground is for every electrical watt that goes underground, it gets dissipated into heat. That heat has to get rejected somehow, whether that's ventilation or a chiller. So without those systems, a lot of that stuff just eventually fails because it gets too hot. Into the future. Some of the recent things that we've done, as Wendy had mentioned, the hoist room at the Rost has been completely renovated. The control system for that is brand spanking new. We've got a brand new Howden fan that is brand, not only the fan, but the controls are brand new. We've begun doing some underground damper controls, so we can change our ventilation underground. It used to be we'd have to go down there and open air doors and vent it around in that way. Now we can do it remotely. Some things that are up on the docket are our dewatering system. It's still that vintage 1980, and we're looking at doing that here within the next year, as well as the wastewater treatment facility. So this is just a real quick example. This is literally things that you see right now at the Yates. This is how they control it. There's levers. They love it. It still works great. But it's really hard to troubleshoot when things don't work right. And so this takes the place of this, and this takes the place of that. So that's just kind of a really big span from 1930 to almost 2030, almost 100 years difference there. So within the next 3 to 5 years, we intend to have almost our entire SCADA system updated. Just real quick, since little plug for surf, that was where I spent the first 3 years of my life here. We're not alone in this. Everybody uses it. And this is just a couple quick little images of their SCADA system. So they're constantly monitoring. I know there's quite a few in this room that, if an alarm went off right now, they'd all look at their phones to see what was going on. And so I just wanted to do a special little shout out to the surf team members, the operators, the maintenance people who keep all this stuff going. And a special thank you to all of those of you who came out tonight to see what it is we do here. So.
Yeah, we're gonna open it up for questions. What questions do you have? What thoughts did this elicit? Anybody out there? Yeah, right back.
Are there any big differences in the rock bolts and turnbuckles and everything you have going on there? Because it feels like there's a lot of stuff on the table. But
Yeah, so we have a resin rebar bolt right here. This is more of a permanent solution for ground control. This is fully encapsulated with resin. So when we do our ground support, when we do our quality control checks, a resin rebar bolt will yield approximately 20 tons. They vary. So we've got a 5 and we've got a 7. So mostly we use, so the ones that are in the cavern I wanted to bring with me, they are 20 feet in length and they weigh 100 pounds. So they told me, no, we can't haul that down there for you, Wendy. So I opted to get these. And then we have more of a temporary ground support, very common in mining when you're going into an area to extract the minerals and you're not going back. So this yields about 5 tons if you're going to do a pull test. It'll fail at 5 tons versus the 20 that we have here. So this is just a little bit more strong ground support.
So those get glued in, these are friction.
Yeah. And I kind of go over budget all the time because I buy too many bolts. But a girl can never have too many bolts, right? This is what you see is a turnbuckle. This end would be anchored with the eye pin into the rock. And then the other end is screwed into the timber with this. This is an example of the J-hooks that are used to daisy chain the structural timber together.
And maybe these will be up here afterwards, so folks can come up and take a look at them and
Yeah.
ask a few more questions after.
Yeah.
They're impressive.
They're heavy, yes.
It looks a lot like the thing I used to bolt stuff to the sheetrock, just a little bit bigger, maybe. I think we have another question here.
Yeah, my question is for Mike. In terms of the overall umbrella science, we've discussed a couple of the experiments, but it's my understanding one of the big deals, agenda-wise, mission-wise, is the hope, and I think it's going to happen, of integrating Einstein's grand unified field theory. I was wondering if you might comment on that.
Well, I think those are some of the science goals related to Dune. So I think that Dune will be addressing some of the, unanswered questions from Einstein. Can I phone a physicist? I don't know, Doug, if you have anything you want to add on that? Wow, you're stumping the physicist too. I don't feel so bad.
It's a great question. What other questions are out here? We got some more. I'll come right back here. Okay.
How much tonnage will that rope hold when you put these big beams on? And I read they're tons worth. How much will that rope hold before it snaps?
Well, it will hold way more than we'll ever put on.
250,000 pounds.
250,000
250,000 pounds.
It's limited to a 13,500 pound load, and the skips are 18,500 pounds. What's the diameter of the rope?
The diameter of the rope's 1.7". And we do checks every shift. We do checks every 14 days. We do X-rays them, we clean them, we inspect them, and it's a big expenditure. So we want to make sure, not only from a safety perspective, but from a financial perspective, that we're taking care of our ropes. Some of the ropes that we're running are legacy homestake ropes. Some of them are brand new. So, and they all test really good. Yes, they're steel ropes, and there's several strands that are, twisted together with a core in the center.
You got one more question back here.
My question, my question is either now or looking into the future, does artificial intelligence fit into any of this?
Yeah, I think, and here again, the physicists can weigh in if they want, but I think where we're going to see AI is in helping analyze the mountains of data that are going to come from these detectors. I'm not sure, well, we have staff who are using AI to help write reports. But yeah, I think really where it's going to be leveraged in a big way will be analyzing the data, because there's just so much of it. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a new thing. Right.
It's finding patterns that we might not necessarily see ourselves in variables. So yeah, we'll be able to see patterns in the data that we wouldn't necessarily be able to see by eye, by just putting one variable against each other. That's where AI might come into it.
Yeah.
My question is, so I ride the cage every day, and you say you cut the rope.
I don't cut it while you're running.
Yeah, that's good to know. But why do you cut the rope? And I guess, so how do you join it back together? And how does that work in terms of continuity of the line?
So the rope has extra. So there are extra what we call wraps on the drum. So when we order the mile-long rope, there's several hundred feet. And so when we do a rope cut, it's on the end, okay? So we have to, first of all, I showed you where we took the twist out, we cut the rope, and then we have to reattach the rope. So the cage has a socket which is poured with resin, and it has to cure for a while before we reattach it to the cage. The skips have what we call a thimble. And so it feeds around the thimble, and then it clips back up at the top. It's very common in mining industry, and it's, like I said, it's better to have a scheduled rope cut than an unplanned rope cut. So this is something that in the homestake days, they did every 3 years. On the skip side, you might want to do it a little bit more. You're going to get rope stretch, you're going to get rope wear, and the NDT test will show if you've got broken wires. We do a measure of the circumference to see if it's deformed in any way, and that tells us that we either need to retire the rope or we can cut the rope. So it's just a regular practice. Yeah, we do NDT the rope ends every year. So that's a little bit different process than a longer process, but it's definitely easier to cut the end of the rope than it would. We would have to replace the rope if we had damage further down. It's a non-destructive test. And so it's essentially like an X-ray, and they clip it to the rope, and the hoist operator runs the hoist at a very low rate of speed, and he'll run the full entirety of the rope.
We've got time for one more question because we're going to leave a little time at the end for a raffle. I've got one from Robin right up here.
Okay, so my question is for Jeff. So how fast does the cage usually go when people are on it? And then how fast does the cage go when you have a load slung underneath of it?
Well, the cage typically will run maybe 700 feet a minute when people are on it, a normal. Yeah, so average. So when we have a load, it depends on the nature of the load. If it's a very large load that doesn't leave us a lot of clearance on the guides or on the sides of the shaft, I've gone down as slow as 50 feet a minute.
Inspection speed, we call it.
Inspection speed, yeah. So that is a long ride to the bottom.
About an hour.
But most loads are somewhere around 200 to 150. Some can go faster if it's not very heavy or if it's, not very big.
It's a lot faster than brakes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Thanks.
Did everybody hear that? Why is it asymmetric in speed?
It has to do with the dogging mechanism and the moisture of our guides. The dogging mechanism is the safety catches. So the cage that you ride on, if you look, you can see up above, you can see these orange, it looks like clamps. So in the event that, let's say that rope got cut and the cage was airmailing down the shaft, that those dogs are gonna grip into those guides and they're gonna stop that cage. So the guides are designed at a certain moisture content to be able to handle that. And so we do a lot of testing. Mike's crew does a lot of testing of the guides, and we struggle to get the moisture content in the upper portions of the shaft because of the freeze thaw. So it's really just a safety precaution that we're utilizing right now. When, you can imagine coming up, it's not going to be as critical as going down. So that's why the speed is different.
We're right at the end of our time, and let's take a quick moment to give a thanks to this crew and to all the operations it served.